Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining today's webinar, Are Building Codes and Standards Important or a Hindrance to Your Business? Presented by Paul Armstrong. Paul is the Director of Code Compliance for TRB and Associates Incorporated, and he has worked for a number of private third-party municipal consulting firms. He has also worked for the International Code Council for 14 years. My name is Haley Bartley. I am a member program specialist here at IFAI, and I will be moderating today's session. This webinar is a brief review of the code sections that impact the awning industry and related enforcement issues. You will have the opportunity to submit text questions to Paul and myself by typing in your questions into the questions box on the control panel. You may send in your questions at any time during the presentation, and we will collect them and address them at the end during the Q&A session. With this, I would now like to introduce today's speaker, Paul Armstrong.
Well, thank you very much, Haley. I appreciate that. And good morning or good afternoon, depending on where you are. Today, we're going to be talking certainly about the model codes and the enforcement of them. We're going to be talking about a number of things, just very briefly, of course. And certainly, just to paraphrase, how they impact your business. Moving on along, if we can get the slides to progress. Okay. There we go. You can see that this is just a little brief if you will, bio of my background, how I became part of this business and why I am consulting and the like. I have been consulting with IFAI now for a little while and tracking code changes and the like through the ICC code development process and also monitoring other types of standards and other codes as well. So to begin the day, people, in some cases, really don't understand what model codes are. Obviously, if you're not in the code development business like I am, it can be a little bit confusing. Model codes are produced predominantly now by just two organizations. There are some other organizations that are involved in other trades and the like. The first one, obviously, is the International Code Council, or ICC. They produce the International Building Code, the International Residential Code for 1- and 2-family dwellings, and the International Fire Code. Interestingly enough, we've just completed their code development process. It was either yesterday or the day before for the last of the cycle, and we'll talk about that, their code development cycle for this year. The National Fire Protection Association also produces codes as well as standards that impact the industry. And certainly NFPA produces their fire code, and then they have NFPA 101, the Life Safety Code, which is a code that is used predominantly in federal and state types of projects and the like. But they produce a number of standards too, as mentioned earlier, that impact this business, and we are trying to track all those at the same time. So how are the model codes created and updated? We're going to stay with the ICC process just in interest of time. The NFPA process is more complicated. It's effectively one cycle for 3 years. Certainly, the International Code Council, as you can see here, has a code development process. Again, in a very similar manner, ICC publishes codes every 3 years. Most of our states right now and localities are looking at the adoption of the latest codes, which are based on the 2018 edition of the international codes. So within the 3-year period, there's really only one chance now to revise any of the codes. ICC, as you can see in the third bullet, has split their codes into 2 different groups. they're not very original, I'm afraid. Lots of engineering types of mentalities involved in these organizations. So Group A and Group B. As mentioned before, we just finished Group B, the second year of the 3-year cycle, and they're heading into a down year, if you will, so that they can go through, publish the international codes, and really work on all of the supporting documentation and ancillary types of books and documents and the like that go along to support those codes. But these codes are held or heard in a 2-hearing type of a cycle. Effectively, the first hearing is usually in early spring, depending on the availability of different venues. And that's heard in front of a technical code committee. The technical code committees listen to debate from proponents, opponents, industry, all sorts of folks involved and interested in codes and how it impacts their businesses too. They take an action on every single item that comes in front of them. So just as an example here, the Group B cycle, which is just finished, they had about close to about 2,500-ish code changes in total to listen to. At the committee I was on, the International Residential Code Committee this time heard close to 400 code changes. That's a lot of material to go through for any committee at any one given time. And so the hearings themselves end up being anywhere from just a little over a week to maybe 2 weeks in total in length. Then the second hearing, and there's a chance to review the actions of the committees and then respond to those. The second hearing then hears those reactions, if you will, or responses from the Code Development Committee. And that's usually in the fall, heading into maybe even close to winter, again, depending on the availability of various venues across the United States. And as an example, we met in Las Vegas this October. And again, we heard all those items that had a comment from the public. And in this case, it was heard, the items were all heard and debated in front of the ICC membership that were assembled there. Then following that, there is an online chance for the ICC members, who are the people who take the or have the authority to vote on all of these code changes. And there's about, well, as I said, it finished up just in the last couple of days. There's a 2-week period or window when it's open after ICC goes through all of the recordings and whatnot and slices and dices them into the various code changes so that you can focus on just your code changes if you would like. And then they produce what's called the preliminary online governmental consensus vote results. And that is the final action, which is being verified. Ultimately, the final tally is approved by the ICC Board of Directors. So, I skipped ahead. You can see that we've gone through all of this, and we went through all of this too. The ICC allows for public comments. Those results then are taken by ICC staff, as they're doing right now, and they make up, in this case, it's kind of a bizarre thing, the 2021 international codes. It's interesting when you have to work that far out in the future, if you will, with model codes, as a lot of our jurisdictions, and a number of them, are still under very old codes yet. And so we have to deal with some of those issues when we're talking with local jurisdictions, certainly, about their interpretations and whatnot. We'll get into that in just a couple of minutes here. So this is just a synopsis. Honestly, it's actually better than what we had about a decade or two ago, where we had the ability to change the codes every year. And we used to have 4 model code organizations in the United States, each with their own individual and separate code development process. and industry and others had to track all of those. So it's made it a lot easier going with the ICC and the international codes. So we have the model codes, we have the base codes that are produced by ICC in this case. They're not adopted necessarily in total by anybody in the United States. The states and the local cities have a chance to go through and amend them to suit their own needs, purposes, climate issues, things along those lines. So the states themselves get a chance to review the codes. Not all states in the United States adopt a code for use within their, if you will, within their state and the like. The states frequently, as mentioned before, amend the codes to suit their needs, their conditions, either climatic, topographic, geographic, location, adjacent to the ocean, perhaps, maybe subject to high winds. There's a lot of reasons that states go through and amend their codes. Frequently, there's also statutory requirements that come into play that address specific uses and occupancies that states will build in. And so they go through a very labor-intensive process of reviewing these codes again and amending them to suit their needs. There are states that say that's it. Everyone in the state will have to use our particular code as their building code within their jurisdiction. Okay, and so it stops there. There are many states, however, that also allow local jurisdictions to adopt their own amended versions of the code. The state in which I'm in, California, does that, and a lot of our jurisdictions have either just completed or in the middle of the adoption process. So you can think of the city of LA, you can think of certainly San Francisco, and then any other jurisdictions in between that go through and based again on climatic, topographic, or geographic conditions, adopt the codes, okay? Lots of the states have agencies that have authority over codes too. And so what happens is they also, because the codes cannot address everything, come up with interpretations or certainly their own opinions that should be effective throughout the state for any given topic. And so we have, again, here in California, the California State Fire Marshal and their staff, they will go through and review questions that are presented to them and then come up with a determination as to how the code applies to that particular issue. The cities and counties, as I said, many go through and amend the codes. They have certain needs. They even build in different zoning or land use types of regulations into the adoption of codes at times. Some sign-related issues and even awning-related issues that are important to planners sometimes get built into codes too. The local cities then, counties as well, have the ability, because they're the staff on the ground that are dealing with the permitting of the projects and ultimately the inspection of those projects. They also have their own interpretations, their own views of how the code applies to a given topic. So it's a very complicated type of a system getting to a code that will be effective within a local jurisdiction. Some jurisdictions in various parts of the country do not adopt anything. Based on their state, it could be the state building code that is effective, or by state law, if they don't adopt within a given time period, they have to enforce what the state has put together just by no action at all on their part. So it really is a very complicated thing out there, unfortunately, and it makes for a variety of interesting and sometimes difficult interpretations that come through those local jurisdictions. So in moving to the code, And we're going to focus on just the two international codes that we have in front of us today, again, based on the interest of time. We have the International Building Code and the International Residential Code. The International Building Code has a number of sections that are very easy to identify, and we'll go through some of those here in just a second. The International Residential Code actually has effectively very little within it, but it does have an exemption to permitting that would be of interest certainly to the industry. So starting with the International Building Code, we're going to pull up a few things here. Certainly definitions. The industry has looked at some of these definitions. We need to go back through these and make sure they work effectively for us. But we have the definition of awning, which is an architectural projection that provides weather protection, identity, or decoration, and is partially or wholly supported by the building to which it is attached. An awning is comprised of a lightweight frame structure over which a covering is attached. So that's what is in the building code now. And so we need to make sure that as the desires of the various, your clients and whatnot, and yourselves as an industry and the like, as things change within industries, we need to make sure that these definitions are consistent with certainly what industry is seeing out there. And that's what we're trying to do, actually, more than anything else. The definition of retractable awning is, you can read it there. I'm not going to read that one. Effectively, it's another one that we get to deal with, too. We're moving on into some of the structural criteria. This is in Chapter 16. You can see that we're talking about loads to these awning types of structures themselves. This is another area that actually spans into another organization's criteria potentially, and that is the American Society of Civil Engineers. They have a standard which is starting to pull out, if you will, a lot of criteria out of the building code in favor of a reference to this standard that covers all things related to loading. They have basically just compiled that over the years, and there's, like I said before, they're slowly just gleaning this criteria out of the code. We're trying to see exactly how ASCE is going to want to address certainly awnings and other projections from exterior walls going out into the future. They've been very aggressive about trying to collect and keep, maintain all that loading criteria within their standard, and so we're working with ASCE2 on a regular basis and have worked with them to make sure that what they're looking at is going to be certainly good for the industry. Here we are. We're still in more of the structural criteria. You can see again, still with live loads, we're talking about potential for snow, other kinds of things, and there's references to those various sections that cover that. Moving on along, we're moving into Chapter 26, and this is more of the fabric type of material, the plastic, if you will, that can be the covering. Note that that's covered in the building code too. And granted, we have NFPA standards that are also applied. Those NFPA standards are adopted by reference in the building codes themselves as well. Now we're starting to get into other areas that, frankly, a lot of people don't seem to track. Chapter 31 is the special projects or the special types of construction. Excuse me. And so you can see as you go down, certainly in the second bullet, there's a highlighted awning term there, and it says, awning shall have frames of non-combustible material, fire retardant treated wood, or heavy timber, or 1 hour construction in certain types of conditions. And so we need to make sure certainly that we're tracking with the industry, the construction materials industries in particular, making sure that what we want to provide in the framework that makes up these awning projections is consistent in the codes with what actually needs to happen out in the industry. Moving on along in that, here's some of the fire testing. You can see that certainly NFPA 286 is called out here. ASTM and UL have standards as well. All of those organizations have an interest in the fire testing of all kinds of materials, whether it's certainly plastics or fabrics or whatever. It can also be the wood, the steel even. Other kinds of elements are covered by this. You can see that they're getting very specific in the flame spread index, certainly for these particular materials, the canopies and the like as well. Oh, one thing I wanted to mention is there's an exception at the bottom. Oh, almost forgot. And that allows for the exemption for awnings that are attached to single-family dwellings and duplexes for the flame spread and some of the other fire propagation types of criteria. Another interesting one that I think we need to take a look at in specific is drainage of water that falls on these awnings and other types of devices, certainly, and assemblies. We need to make sure that certainly this is accurate and works well with the industry about the requirement or the restriction of having the flow from these elements not go over public walking surfaces. Sometimes that's a little bit difficult, but we have that certainly to deal with. Okay, continuing on, we're dealing with certainly the vertical clearance of these elements. The fire department in particular is very concerned, as well as public works, with having a proper clearance from the public way when these projections are coming out across the public way, so that they can gain access to the buildings in the event of a fire or some other type of circumstance that would cause them to maybe affect a rescue or have to make an upper level entry into the building. Public Works is very concerned about that. Obviously they're working with the fire department's concerns too, but they have other issues that come to play that are embodied in this too, just about making sure that we're a sufficient height above the sidewalks and the like that are in front of our buildings. Here we are, we're still talking about other types of issues, temporary awnings, things of that nature. That's all covered in the building code as well. So we're getting to the residential code, and this is a very interesting section right here. This is an exception to the code requirements themselves, to actually permitting of these awnings. Now, with that being said, a lot of jurisdictions still require a different kind of permit to be imposed on this. We'll talk about certainly some of their needs a little bit later on in general, but our planning department has concerns about all things that are facing the property, can be seen from the street, all sorts of issues that they involve themselves into. Okay, this would be a very good section to make sure continues in the local jurisdictions' model codes or adopted codes as they go through their code development process. We'll talk about some of the things related to the adoption of codes and how you can work with local jurisdictions at the end of this here this morning. But this is a good item to work with your local jurisdictions on, to come alongside and help them understand that they don't necessarily need to have a building permit. A zoning permit is another issue altogether, and you need to work very closely, certainly, with the planners in the local jurisdictions to address that. So we've gone through certainly the model codes. We've gone through the process by which they've changed very quickly. If anyone is interested, certainly, in understanding and even participating in the code development process, please send your contact information to IFAI, either to Haley or to Maureen, and we would be more than happy to sit down with you, if you will, or have a long call to talk about the process and what's really involved with affecting changes to the codes. Okay. The application of codes is the next item here. And this is the one that I think we need as an industry to reach out and provide more information out to those that enforce the code. So, who gets to interpret the code, right? Who is that? So, it's the building official and the fire official. Okay, and we're just talking about the building and fire codes themselves. Okay, they have been in most jurisdictions across the United States given the authority to read through the codes, to understand the codes, hopefully to have a good idea of the reasoning or intent to various criteria in the codes, and then to give an interpretation. Like mentioned before, there is no way that a set of building codes can cover every potential situation in the built environment. And as such, building officials and fire officials need to make interpretations as to the application of the code. Just so you know, I am a building official. I am a building official of a small jurisdiction here in Southern California called Signal Hill. If you're familiar with Southern California and the Long Beach area, it is the only hill in the Long Beach area that happens to be its own city. Very interesting city in and of itself, in that obviously because it's a hill, it has tremendous views, and the planners and the building department are very concerned about that. It also has an unbelievable history in the petroleum world as well, and you can take a look at that if you're interested later. But the building officials and fire officials have to know a lot about the building codes themselves and the fire codes. We do have some building officials and fire officials that have, frankly, a different view on how things should be. Certainly, when a building is fully sprinklered, do projections that extend out from exterior walls need to have the same sort of fire sprinkler protection as you would on the inside of the building. We've seen a variety of interpretations. I physically have seen very interesting applications of sprinklers under different types of canopied or awning sorts of construction. It makes it kind of a challenge if the jurisdiction requests that the sprinkler system be extended out underneath or to protect the underside area of these awnings, in that it adds a considerable amount to the budget for this particular project. And frequently, if that's the case, sometimes it shuts down the project altogether, which is unfortunate, of course. Some jurisdictions consider the area under all awnings as habitable space. That is not the case. It is true that some awnings, canopies, that sort of construction do contain habitable space at times, but frankly, most do not. They're intended for weather protection or shade, as you know, and unfortunately, this makes it a little bit difficult for the industry, in that sometimes you have to go back in and do different kinds of analysis to the existing building as a whole to determine whether or not, based on this added floor area, the building now complies with the requirements of the building code too. Type of construction is another interesting one. Certainly, in some cases, folks are not able to provide protected, or it really isn't possible to provide protected steel for some of these light frame structures based on the requirement for the main building itself. And I've seen some jurisdictions, usually it's plan reviewers, very few building officials, but it's some of our rookie plan reviewers extend that type of requirement out to awnings too. That shouldn't be the case. Obviously, these awnings are in the exterior of the building, and certainly if They're applied to non-residential buildings and all that. The covering and excuse me, and the other elements that make up the awning itself are protected sufficiently. Fire separation distance. This is the projection of that awning out towards the public way or sometimes into the public way. And some jurisdictions basically, and it's not just the building department, it frequently our planners get involved with this to limit the distance that these awnings can project out that are outside of the codes as well. So with that, we have other types of enforcement issues. I mean, we basically have gone through and talked about the adoption of codes and then the how you look at the codes and how you interpret them. Here comes the physical reality of what we get to deal with in the local jurisdictions. For one, when you come in to get a permit for your project, you know, what kind of construction documents are required? All right. Do you need engineering? Do you need to have structural calculations for wind? For some even require, depending on the size, certainly of these awnings, seismic analysis as well. We've already talked a bit about the projection issues. Those need to be carried into this kind of idea with, you know, what do you provide with the construction documents? There's analysis for all kinds of things out there. The other thing is after the projects are permitted, then we move into the inspection phase. How many inspections are actually required? You know, every jurisdiction seems to have a different view of this. Certainly, again, the biggest building department in the world is the city of Los Angeles. They have a different view than most people anywhere in how things should be certainly permitted and inspected in these regards. Then we know that when you're out in the field, frequently things change. You start to do the work, the owner asks for a revision, or because of challenges with the existing building itself and connecting the awnings to the existing building, sometimes from a structural standpoint, the connections and other sorts of conditions change. And so then you have to go back in, and will the inspector handle that out in the field, or are they going to send you back in to the plan reviewer or building official to review and approve those particular revisions? And then we have certainly unpermitted work. And I know that doesn't happen anywhere else but here maybe in Southern California. But there are situations when you come up against, we'll put it this way, an existing situation that didn't have a permit. Somebody put it up without going to the local city or county or what have you. And so at times, then what happens is the local building department's going to make you bring that up to code or remove that or amend it in some manner as to be code compliant. If somebody happens to actually attempt to put up things without a permit, there is another group that's out there. Besides the building inspectors who are looking for unpermitted work, but there's a code enforcement group that is going along looking for unpermitted work, among many other things, abandoned vehicles and weeds and all of that. And all of a sudden, you might have a notice of violation that you have to deal with too. And so please work with the local jurisdictions. Like I said, I'm a building official. I prefer to get things done and to have work progress and actually be completed, you know, in a code compliant manner. And so most building officials are that way. We like to handle that. And then you have zoning issues, the planning department, basically. They're another group that really doesn't understand much of, frankly, the construction industry. They understand views. They understand the environment that they're trying to create in a given region. And so it's a really good idea that if you're finding pushback from the planners in particular on doing certain types of awnings or whatever, to work with them and certainly to work with their planning commission to maybe amend their own zoning code to allow for those uses too. Some of these zoning codes and all that have been around for many, many years, and they haven't changed. And they really haven't changed. It feels like it's an act of God to make a change to these, but it's always prudent to work within the system if you can to affect those changes. And if you have to, you can talk to your local city council or mayor, a board of supervisors, whatever form of government that you're dealing with, and maybe they can give some incentive to the local planners to make those kinds of changes. So, are codes important to your business? They impact your business on a daily basis. It is, if you will, a necessary evil. It is a process that has been required over the years based on people who are not as involved in the industry going around and not getting permits for their work, doing shoddy work. Some of them we've seen actually put up elements and disappear and leave the owner of the project, the property, whatever it happens to be, holding the bag. That is a problem, and it's a headache just about every other day, certainly for me, in all kinds of other ways, not with awnings and canopies and those sorts of projections, but just as a whole. And so anything you can do to work within the industry, to work within the system that's there, frankly, that's been provided basically to level the playing field for all of us, would really be a help. And we'll talk about some things you can do here in just a couple of minutes. So is it important to be involved? Absolutely. I know that my staff, and myself included, if I see a regular face coming up to the counter and I know that they are really concerned about providing a good quality product, about doing or providing a great service for certainly the community as a whole, but the owner of that building, we're going to work with you. There's plenty enough people out there that want to fight, and they want to argue, and they want to, run up the food chain and try and beat you up to get their way. And while that sometimes works, it in the long haul, I think it works against you. So I think it's very important to be involved, certainly in your local community, and we'll talk about some other ways here in just a minute too. And we know that local interpretations can be a problem. Okay, how do we affect a change in that? How do we affect a change in anything when people have a differing viewpoint? And the main way is education, right? It is the opportunity, not just for me, but certainly for all of us, to go through and educate the local jurisdiction, the local building official, fire official, planners, and all that on our particular industry. Okay, the codes cover everything in the built environment. No one knows everything. Building official, fire official, they don't know everything. And so if you can go through and help to educate them, and we'll talk about some ways to do that here in just a bit, I think that'll go a long ways in making things easier, certainly from a permitting and inspection, plan review type of standpoint, but for the industry as a whole in terms of any sort of amendments to their local codes and even the national code. So here we are. We're towards the end of the presentation here. We'll open it up once we're done for questions and the like. How can you get involved? How can you have an impact, certainly, on the industry within the areas that you serve? Okay, let's go through. These are just a few ideas. We're going to start at the big overall picture, right? ICC's model code process, or NFPA, or even if you want to get down into the standards and all of the testing standards and whatnot, that can be done too. But from the model code standpoint, okay, conduct research, write papers, okay. IFAI has their magazine. I think I just received yesterday their latest version, okay. Produce articles, all right. Anything that we can get in front of people to help them understand the concerns that the industry has, and maybe even the changing technology, is going to help, okay. Identify existing issues or issues in existing codes. All right, we need to know where certainly you're having problems within the model codes, within the standards, that sort of thing. I only know as much as I know. I'm involved in the entire construction industry, like, building officials and all that. This is an opportunity for me and us all to learn, to see what can be done to affect changes to help the industry and to promote fire safety, life safety, and certainly community types of development. Moving on along with that, after identifying those issues, developing and submitting code changes. That's what I do. I participate in the code development process. It's a lot like watching grass grow, if you will, because you're there for a long time until you actually get your code change come up. But you can develop and submit them to ICC and to other organizations and have them then in the process to be heard. And along with that, to actually participate, to actually show up to the various meetings and support, oppose code changes, whatever. We're going to identify those problems that with the existing codes. We're going to try to develop new code changes to either affect a change there or to address what some of the changes are in the industry. And frankly, there are people out there that are going to be developing code changes that we don't like, that don't work for us. And so we may need to oppose those particular code changes. All right. So that's another aspect. There's the 2 hearings in the ICC code development process. Yes, again, they have a tendency to be very long. If you can, if they're in your region, or if you have the ability to travel, at least for a few days, it's a great idea to be there. For one, okay, you look at the last bullet there. You get to work then with the industry groups that are there and hopefully cause them to want to support your ideas, your code changes. Okay, it's a networking opportunity in the code development world. And if you can get certainly the American Iron and Steel Institute, who represents the steel industry, we use steel in the products that we produce, to come alongside and help, okay, that is a big, big plus in the code development world and in certainly getting information out to our local jurisdictions. Moving on kind of down the food chain then, the food chain then. As the model codes are produced, the states actually get a hold of them. If you have the ability to work with various state agencies, and every state has a different body or bodies that handle the codes, okay, it's a great idea to get to know them, if nothing else. These are people that have an impact on the construction industry as a whole, but certainly the awning and canopy and other projection types of industry groups too. Help them with code issues. They don't know everything. They're trying under very severe deadlines to get their jobs done. And sometimes they have politicians, frankly, who are leaning on them to address certain issues. We have all kinds of things popping up certainly in the state of California and many other states related to that. Attending their hearings. Okay, they have committees, they have subcommittees. If you can at all, participate or encourage someone to participate on your behalf. It's impossible for me to hit all 50 states. I'm just one person. Okay, we have to work as a team to affect those changes. And then supporting their legislation. You can actually go to your state representatives of various types and talk with them about, if you will, legislative issues that are important to the industry. Okay, and you can be a support for them as they're going through the process. That really helps. Moving on to the cities and counties and the like, most importantly, get to know the local building and, frankly, fire official if you can. They have a tough job. They have to address every issue in the built environment within their particular city or county. Okay, it really does help to have someone come alongside and help with various code issues and things of that nature. Okay, the same sort of types of systems and processes are in place for local cities as there are for states, and even to a degree the model codes. Participate. Don't be afraid to talk with them. They're real people. They have real concerns. They're trying to do the best they can for the most part, to protect the occupants that they serve, the citizens of their city or county. Then there are local associations. Okay, there are state and there's local, if you will, city or regional types of chapters. ICC, the International Code Council, has chapters. Okay, one nice thing is to actually go and give a presentation on the issues related to awnings to your local chapter. I know for a fact, since I just came off of the board of one of these chapters about a week ago, that they are looking for people to give lunchtime presentations, or maybe it's an evening type of presentation. Okay, they'll usually pick up your meal. You know, you can do a presentation, you can hand out materials. That really helps, certainly, to educate, again, the local building officials and fire officials. There's fire types of officials too. Lots of these groups also have separate code committees that you can work with, and you don't have to attend every meeting. All right, but to be there and to get to know them, to work with them, is a great proactive way to step in and really help the industry. And sometimes you can also help sponsor some of their events and meetings. The same is true with fire marshals associations, as I mentioned, as with building official chapters and associations. They are looking for as much information as possible. Okay, this is an education type of business. Things are changing. At least the model codes are changing every 3 years. Okay, and so we have to go through and update ourselves on those changes to effectively apply this very large set of building regulations within our local jurisdictions. Lastly, you know, you can support all their activities, certainly even in front of various city councils, boards of supervisors, or whatever. When you get to know them, you can even, believe it or not, some people are friends with industry folks. That's happened to me too. And you'll actually get to appreciate their position and understand, certainly, the difficulty that they have too. So with that, that is my presentation. What I'd like to do is to open it up for any questions you might have. Anything, it doesn't really matter to me. I don't know everything, as I said, but I will attempt to answer it based on my experiences and what information I know. And if need be, we can also find people that know about those particular issues and get responses to your questions too. So Haley, do we have any questions?
Great. Yeah, thank you, Paul. We have some questions. The first one is, how can I be a member able to submit code changes?
Okay. Code changes, we'll start with the model code. Anyone can submit code changes. You don't actually have to be a member of ICC. We can develop code changes for yourself or for the industry or whatever, and you don't actually have to be even a voting member of ICC, certainly. Now, with that being said, it's not a bad idea to become a member. There are some benefits to it, but that's not a problem. We can work within our own kind of code committee format and develop code changes, and you don't actually have to be a member then.
Great.
Next.
Next question is, other than codes requiring permits, what are other reasons for getting permits?
That's a great question. There are other reasons than just the set of codes that require that we get permits outside, certainly, of the permitting process. What we found is after the fact, if there's a problem, insurance interests become very interested in whether or not you've had a permit for a particular project. I have been retained as basically subject matter expert or expert witness on a number of different cases. And as soon as they find out that there's been no permit pulled and whatnot, that's kind of the kiss of death right there. You're pretty much automatically assumed to be in violation at that point. And the courts, from what we found, although they don't usually make it to court, they get settled pretty quickly after that. do not find in your favor, and then you're hanging out there, because the insurance interest, it's the first thing they ask for is, let's get the approved plans, let's get the permits to make sure it was done right. If that's not there, you're going to have a hard time having your insurance companies back you up. Another thing that actually aspect to it, that it's a little more broad and vague, but I like leaving different projects I've been involved with in a very good way. I like to serve certainly my clients as well as the community as a whole, and permitting is something that helps give them a good sense of comfort that the project is going to, whatever it happens to be in terms of an awning or what have you, is going to be safe for their families, their friends, their basically their own customers and the like. So that's just a couple of different issues related to why we should get permits. Honestly, the biggie is the insurance in my mind. You don't want to have the insurance company back away from you, and all of a sudden you're going to be footing the whole bill yourself. Next question.
Yes. Next question is there a specific reason why some municipalities require a building permit to take off an awning from a building, replacing its fabric and putting it back on? Also, why do some municipalities require new engineering on existing awning when the same attachment method is used?
Well, that goes back to the interpretation of the codes. The code, if you will, in Chapter 1 for the requirement of permits doesn't go into a lot of detail. And so honestly, it probably is involving more of the planning issues than it is, or the planners than it is the building department, because the building departments understand replacement in kind. They know how that can happen. It could be that our land use regulations, the planners want to make sure that what's going up is going to fit within their idea of what the community should look like, or what that region should look like, if it's a specific plan area or what have you. In terms of the engineered calculations and whatnot, that's a difficult one. I don't necessarily certainly agree with that myself, because if it's already there, it's the same existing framing. Maybe you're repairing it, maintaining it, and whatnot. Presumably, it's been fine up until this point, and why do we need to go back through and re-verify the structural calcs? Structural calculations or structural criteria in the codes do change. Sometimes from a wind standpoint, they have changed dramatically. They want to make sure that perhaps the new, if you will, thoughts that are built into the wind loading criteria through ASCE 7 and other groups are now being mitigated by the structure that's being put into place and the covering that's being reapplied to that awning. Honestly, I personally don't have that much difficulty with the demolition, certainly the removal of it altogether, or the removal and replacing in kind of a thing. But lots of times they have a tendency to change the scope of the project, and sometimes you do need to get calcs. Unfortunately, that's an interpretation that varies rather dramatically across the land. I wish I could help on that one. Anything else?
Great. Yeah, we can go over another question. Why do I get differing interpretations from local cities?
Why do you get differing interpretations from local cities, even cities that are next to each other? A good case in point is frankly the city I serve versus the city we're completely surrounded by. I serve the city of Signal Hill, and we're surrounded by the city of Long Beach. Long Beach has a different view on all sorts of things than I do in the city of Signal Hill. Lots of cases are based, though, on just a lack of education as to that particular industry, whether it's the awning industry or, whatever sort of projection or whatnot. The city of Long Beach also has a lot more staff than Signal Hill does. Signal Hill has myself and one inspector. Long Beach has plan review staff. They have many inspectors. They've got like 3 or 4 different folks that actually have building official responsibilities, and they all have different backgrounds. And so sometimes they view things differently. And what we're hoping to do, certainly through the suggestions I have, is to get those interpretations, to get those same people to have the same interpretation. It's a better way of putting it, actually. And so that's what I really am hoping more than anything else, that when we can go out and periodically just stop in and meet the local building officials or their staff, and then get to know them, then they will start to understand more about the industry, and hopefully the interpretations will be the same from then on. Anything else?
Great. No, we can wrap it up here. A big thank you to Paul for the presentation, and thank you all for attending. If you have any questions in the future, feel free to reach out to us at IFAI, and we can connect you with Paul on getting those answered. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you, everybody.